Hey everyone, and welcome to the third episode of Let's Talk About It. And today I sat down with Dr. Renata Taravski. You guys might know her as at Aligned with Renata on Instagram. Huge fan. She's very talented at the reels. She is also very, very informative when it comes to astrology and birth charting. And also, what I love about her approach with it is that she helps us understand astrology and birth charting with a practical application, I feel like. And so I like what she has to say about astrology and birth charting and how I can learn to apply it to my own life. So without further ado, let's get into the show. Hey everyone, so I am here today with my friend Dr. Renata Taravski. Renata is a naturopathic doctor in Toronto, Ontario, and you guys probably know her a little bit, I'm assuming, if you guys follow me on the gram, because I'm a huge fan of Renata's Instagram account, which is Align with Renata. So I'm really pumped about this conversation today because you have definitely gotten me into learning more about birth charting and astrology, like way more than I ever got into ever in my life before. So yeah, I'm really excited to have this conversation with you today.
Yeah, well, thank you for having me. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, so let's start back from the beginning. Of your and I's relationship, I suppose. So we were in the same year together, and we lived on the same floor at the naturopathic college. So that was like our first like exposure to each other. And we never really chatted all that much at all, like throughout CCNM. We kind of like were in our own groups and doing our own thing. And like it wasn't that big of a class either, but like, yeah, we never really like spent much time together, but it was more like afterwards, like after we both graduated and were like in our practices and whatever, that, you know, every time I would come to Toronto, we'd make a point to catch up with each other.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's funny how things change, eh?
It is, because I remember seeing like your journey with yoga, and you were just like, I thought it was really cool what you were doing, because it was not like the ND norm, and I was kind of in the same box, you know, more talking about the spirituality. So I think that I was like, oh, I love what she's doing, and like you were just sharing your journey, and it really fascinated me. And I remember like saying that to you. I think that's how it started, and then we just kind of got into conversation, and then here we are today.
Yeah, exactly. Because yeah, you also took your yoga teacher training, I think around the same time that I did. I think you might have done yours before me. I can't remember in the timeline of events, but
God, I don't know what year was that.
I don't even know.
Yeah. We were both on the yoga journey together in our own ways.
Yeah, absolutely. And then you were the first person that ever gave me a tarot reading or like an oracle card reading or anything, because I didn't know anything about that stuff. And then I was an immediate convert after that, like totally into it, because I just found it to be so fascinating what you were doing and like what you were teaching me in the process.
Yeah, and I think a lot of times people just don't really, they have this idea like of what that whole world's about until they actually experience it. Obviously, with someone who has integrity, there's some charlatans, don't get me wrong. I'm aware of the situation. They're kind of like, oh, like this isn't what maybe my programming said it was going to be.
Yeah.
So I love when that happens. I love it.
Yeah. And it's one I find like with tarot readings, with birth charting, all that type of stuff, because I am a skeptic to a certain degree, but it's when it uncovers pain points that, you know, or ask you questions that challenge your way of thinking, that really make you think about something, that's what I appreciate the most about that world of like spirituality, of kind of diving deep into our understanding of ourselves. Yeah. Which is, I'm sure you have much more to say about that.
Yeah. And that's what I use it as, a tool, right? I always repeat myself because everyone likes to make fun of astrology, and oh my God, because you're an asparagus or you're a cauliflower, so you won't date me. And it's like, astrology is not black and white. That's not how I use astrology. It's a tool to illuminate your potential, right? It's a language. It's the language of the sky, and it can help you better understand yourself. When I read someone's chart, I'm not like, well, these are some great things and these are some like challenging aspects, but it's really depending on how you want to show up. Like there still has to be a self-responsibility in this lifetime. And sometimes people just think it's like, oh, I blame my Mercury in Scorpio for blah, blah, blah. And you're like, that's not how shit works. Yeah. So I really like to, I'm very woo-woo, but I'm very pragmatic at the same time. I like to blend the unseen and the seen world together, because I do find like we can't ignore either one, or we can't just be one or extreme or the other. Mm-hmm. That's just my philosophy. That might change.
Yeah. And I think that's why I resonate so much with how you approach the astrology stuff, because it's more from a way of learning how to understand how we can show up as individuals in society, and then that whole idea of alignment that comes along with that too. So actually, that's actually a great question for you. Is I want you to explain what alignment is, or how would you explain alignment from your perspective?
Yeah. So it's kind of like it's leveled, or it's different expressions of alignment. But the fundamental of alignment to me is alignment. It's like we're in flow. Alignment means feeling good. Okay. But I want to break this down because there's some myths I need to debunk around that. Yeah. Okay. Alignment is also feeling good, but it's like, well, then you have to define, well, what is it that you want to feel? Right. So it's like, we're always chasing things or experiences in life, but really we're chasing the feeling. So that is like what it ultimately is, my alignment. Like, what's that state that I want to be in? Right. So for me, a big thing is like free, fun, so if I'm doing things that enforce that feeling, it's not necessarily the thing itself. It's like, does this help me feel that way? Mm-hmm. Right. Alignment is also a moment to moment phenomenon. Your alignment will change. So like my alignment a couple of years ago looked a different way than my alignment does today. So we have to be open to the fact that your alignment will shift and change as you grow and shift and change. So sometimes what was once in alignment with us kind of feels like it's expired, or there's this stagnantness that maybe we can't pinpoint or put our finger on, or it feels like something's missing. And that's when I'm like, well, maybe because there's something that's no longer aligned. And then sometimes what we do is we say, oh, well, I don't want to walk away from that. And there's no like, it doesn't have to even be dramatic, but it's like, this just does not align with me anymore. Friendships, jobs, workout routines, like we can go through the basics of day to day, and then we make it very complicating sometimes, right? Because maybe there is no drama around it. And I think because as we grow and evolve and we have different experiences, sometimes we don't even know who we are. Like we think we know who we are until we have a certain experience. Like, and we actually learned this in school. I remember it was our Chinese medicine. I don't know, one of the professors was like, you don't know how you're going to show up after a certain heartbreak or maybe a loss of a loved one. Like you actually don't know how that will change you as a person or your soul. And I was like, that really made me realize that yes, I am Renata at my core, but I have to be open to expanding constantly. I won't actually know how I'm going to show up sometimes in life until I face certain experiences. Like I never, for example, thought I would be doing what I'm doing right now.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? So
yeah, absolutely.
That's what alignment means to me. It's a moment to moment a phenomenon where it feels like your thoughts, your actions, and your being are all consistent.
Right. And I think like when you were talking about that, it made me think about our obsession with identification, that we identify as being this or as being that. And even like in like specific moments, even like emotional expression as an example, where like for me as an example, I've always identified myself as being like a very like chill, cool, calm and collected person on the inside. Or like that I would handle a situation that way, but really like I'm like fire. Yeah. And that's always surprised me about myself. And so I can say with that, of what you said, that resonated with me, because it's like it's the guilt and the shame around not behaving in a way that you felt like you were supposed to because of this framework that you made up for yourself of how you're supposed to be.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I had to walk the talk, right? So going through naturopathic medicine school, you know, second year into practicing and being like, wait a second, like something's missing. And it's not that this world isn't aligned with me, but the way I was expressing this or having this experience necessarily wasn't aligned with me.
Mm-hmm.
Where I want to branch out and do more of that spirituality, soul development, like purpose, fulfillment, like uncovering, unearthing limiting beliefs that prevent you from showing up. Because I saw from practice how that can affect you physically. And just because that was just a stepping stone in my journey. But sometimes people get so bloody attached. Well, I went to school, you know, so this is the way it's going to be. And then you get there and you're like, wait a tick, something's off. And then we try to resist the shit out of that for years, or we just keep going through the motions because we got to keep up with the Joneses. And then what's this? So, and then someone says something, or someone you hold of high regard, or a family member or a sibling or a friend. And then you're like, I'm going to prove you wrong. But then you're like, what is happening right now? Like, how did this, and then your ego's just literally running the show.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? So that was my personal experience of alignment. And I really had to let go of, wow, I just invested a lot of money into my education. I had to pay for that. I had student loans. And now I want to explore this world. Like, what is happening? And really letting go of that quote unquote naturopathic doctor title, and realizing that that is not me. That's just a certification I have.
Mm-hmm.
Right? But who am I without all that?
Did you feel any elements of like guilt or shame around being like, oh my goodness, like I don't identify with this thing that I just spent so much money and time on?
I don't know if it was guilt or shame. I think it was more, there was a lot of denial. There was denial. I'm trying to think of what I felt. It was denial. It was confusion. Maybe guilty in the sense that I'm like, I spend all that money and time. I think it was more denial though. Yeah, it was more denial. And a lack of confidence or not feeling worthy enough, because it was like, whoa, or something wrong with me.
Yes.
Does that make sense? So it's like, because I'm like, everyone else seems to be bebopping around. What the hell's wrong with me? Why can't I just like put myself in that box? Interesting enough, through my self-development spiritual journey, I realized that I'm not someone to be put in a box. I'm very unconventional. I'm a bit eccentric, different. And I realized, well, no wonder I was going against my alignment. So no wonder I felt confused, because I was trying to be someone that wasn't really naturally my expression.
Right.
And I was making myself wrong for it.
And was that something that you discovered about yourself when you started learning more about astrology?
Yeah, and not just astrology, but just, I would say, my personal and healing journey, for sure. I recognize how I have this conflict with feeling like an outsider, but it was really illuminated in my chart, because that's actually a common theme in my chart. It's like, I had this wound around expressing myself, my truth, as much as people don't think that I do. I actually do. I had to work through a lot of shit to voice my truth about things, or not my truth, not the truth. And also I had this big wound around feeling like an outsider, and I keep parts of myself hidden. So it was a lot of work to like really do some inner stuff, and then pull that hidden side of me out, and just like be okay with being different and not the norm, and not having to make it mean anything.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. And so I want you to eventually explain this to us
Sure.
about like the most important elements or aspects of someone's chart to pay attention to. But before we get into that, I am curious about your thoughts on Chiron, because the Chiron and the wounded healer thing, and exactly like along the lines of what you had discussed. But even when I did my birth chart with you, was that February it was earlier this year.
I don't remember.
Yeah. And Yeah,
I don't know what year it is.
It was like almost a year ago, I think.
Okay.
And it was the first time that anyone had ever, or that I had ever really gained an understanding of what Chiron actually was. Aside from just like my superficial reading of the subject, like just out of interest sake online. But it was recently, like probably like a couple weeks ago or so, that I really started to deep dive into the whole element of Chiron as being like that wounded healer, that thing that we like are almost ashamed of, if you will. Maybe not the right word for everyone, but like I feel it as like a shame thing or an embarrassment about me, or that one thing that always holds me back.
I would say deepest insecurity. It represents our deepest insecurity.
Yeah. So yeah, can you explain Chiron a little bit to us about?
Yeah, so Chiron is like an asteroid. I think they call it a planetoid, or maybe I'm making that shit up. I identify it with as an asteroid. I'm sure there's everyone has their different view on Chiron. Regardless what Chiron represents, is the archetype that represents like I said, our deepest wound, but it's an old wound. And if you're the type of person that believes in past lives and karma, it's like that. It's like an old wound that we've been dragging around for lifetimes. And it's like every lifetime we're here to kind of heal a deeper layer of it. That's how I identify to Chiron. And for people who don't identify with past lives, it's totally cool too. It just maybe be like, that is your deepest wound from maybe your childhood. And where it does come from is childhood, right? That's where that wound in this experience in this lifetime. And what I love about Chiron is Chiron, yes, while it might be our deepest wound and our insecurity, it's also where our greatest healing gifts lie. And when I say that, I don't mean you gotta, and I always say, I joke, I don't mean you gotta start an Instagram page about like your now healing abilities from Chiron, but it's like, for example, if my Chiron is in Gemini and it's in the 11th house of Aquarius, which represents community, friendships, and Aquarius is like the rebel, the nonconformist. So there's always this thing, I feel different, or I feel weird, or I feel I don't belong. I always feel like I don't really belong anywhere. I'm this kind of like floating person. So a lot of times I resisted feeling different. So I would try to kind of adapt and be like, I still was kind of fiery in my own person, but I was not really just owning that. And when you kind of start to work with your Chiron, so I teach that in the reading, obviously, with people, what happens is that it's never going to go away. The insecurity and the wound's never going to go away. But I use that to say, oh, there's my Chiron lurking, or oh, there's that thing that I'm such a weirdo and whatever. It's like, okay, got it. That's there right now. So it's an opportunity for me. I can resist this, or I can say, okay, what's this calling me to do? Leaning into that discomfort, right? And when you start to embody or work with your Chiron, you heal, like it's indirect healing of others. It's not like you're saying, like, I'm healing you now, I'm helping you speak your truth, but by me embodying my truth and embodying the fact that I'm different and I don't have anything in my space about that, it inspires other people who feel that way. Do you get what I'm saying? And it allows them to then start to own that aspect of themselves that maybe they felt wounded. Like, it's interesting because I do have a lot of people that are like, I'm the weirdo too, and blah, blah, blah. So it's like when I started expressing that and, owning that, and that inspired others to be like, oh, wow, it's okay that I'm different and I can't put myself in a box. Like, cool. So then you start to call in the right people in your life, right? And then, so depending on where Chiron's situated in your chart is one thing. What zodiac sign it's in is one layer. What house it's in is a second layer. So I have a fear of speaking my truth in terms of like acquaintances, community as a global thing, the 11th house, and that rules technology and social media, all that stuff. So it's like, hells yeah, I always feel like I don't belong. I don't have a community. Do you get what I'm saying? So that's where it's like so deeply hyper focused. So there's the generalization of your Chiron, but then if you really want to dig deeper, and then you want to see what other planets or celestial bodies, because the moon and the sun aren't planets or celestial, they're luminaries. Okay. And then the rest are planets. So I'll just call them celestial bodies just to group everything in. So then you want to say, well, where does Chiron, what other planets is it communicating with? Because that further deepens the wound and it gives you access to saying, where does healing need to happen?
Okay.
So then you can just have context, like, oh, okay. Because every time I express something that's maybe a little outside my comfort zone, I'm always second guessing. I'm always like, oh shit, like, should I have said that? I don't know if I should say that. And I realize, I'm like, it's okay. This is part of your healing, Renata, is to be okay with speaking your truth and not have everyone agree with it, validate it, even understand it. So your Chiron is to really bring wholeness. How can I bring more wholeness into myself, depending on what that insecurity is?
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, that does make sense. Question about the Chiron and Gemini thing. That's in years, right? So like everyone born from like, is it like 1984 to like part of 1988 would have a Chiron and Gemini?
So it's Chiron sits in different zodiac signs for different segments of the year, and Chiron has a really weird transit, right? So it has a very erratic transit. So it's not that it's like it's in 4 years in Gemini, 4 years in Cancer, 4 years in Aries, whatever. It's like sometimes it's like 8 years or 9 years in Aries and like 1 year in this other zodiac sign. So it has a really weird erratic transit. But I do find there's a group of people who will have Chiron and Gemini from this year to this year, but it's not just like every 6 months or every year it changes into a new sign. So it has a very weird erratic transit, Chiron.
Right. Okay. Because we both have Chiron and Gemini, but I think we were born in the same year. And then my Chiron is in the 3rd house, I believe.
So that really accentuates communication.
Yes.
Yeah. So it's like, because that's the house of Gemini rules the 3rd house communication. So that's like on steroids. You're thinking, you might feeling like you always have to learn, or I need to check the information first.
I said it wrong. So Gemini is the 3rd, associated with the 3rd house.
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry. I said it wrong. So my Chiron is in the 10th house, I think. I can't even remember anymore. I think it's the 10th house. I'm actually going to look it up right now.
Yeah. If it is, that's communicating your truth in your life's work.
Ah, okay. Yeah, because I have this thing. Yeah, it's Chiron. If I can find it really quickly, we will like look at this for a second, because I find this stuff to be super interesting. Yeah, it's in the 10th house. Mm-hmm. Yeah, Chiron in the 10th house. That's what it is.
Yeah, so that's also fears of communicating your truth in the public sphere, like your life's work, your reputation, and also wounds around like success. Right? Like, can I breaking away from old programming of success from your upbringing? Because the opposition of the 10th house is the 4th house of home in our ancestral root. So there's like a lot of wounding and healing around what you were programmed to believe success is. And now being like, okay, well, I got to heal my blocks around success and showing up this way. Maybe that was different than my upbringing. So it's layered. And then it depends on what other planets or celestial bodies it communicates with. It makes really, like, Chiron almost hits every celestial body in my chart. So I'm a walking scab, which is, the healing gift on that. And I can really empathize with people's insecurities and stuff. But then it's like, okay, I got that. And I look at more as a blessing, but it definitely felt like a curse most of my life, because I didn't know what to do with it.
Yeah. Would you say that's part of the reason why you got into naturopathic medicine, or like a healing profession?
Oh, 100%. Looking at my chart now, why? Like, everything stems around healing, right? Or maybe alternative views of healing and spirituality. Like, that is just one of the major themes of my chart. And again, because I've always thought differently, I came across naturopathic medicine in university, which was like, I don't know, almost for sure 12 years ago, 15, 12, just say, let's say 10 years, a while ago. And I remember never learning anything about it prior to. Like, at the time, we were learning about exercise and, I don't know, eating salmon or something. And like, I'm even trying to think, but it was, anyways, that was interesting what was promoted as nutrition back then. But I remember coming across it at a job fair, and I was struggling with my own mental health and physical health and all that stuff. And I remember reading this, and I was like, this makes so much sense to me. Like, I didn't question it. I wasn't like, I don't know. I didn't have any resistance, because again, I was always open to thinking differently. Right. And so again, that naturopathic medicine would be deemed unconventional. Right. But I'm just like, but to me, it makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, I found we actually used to jokingly, I don't know if you used to call it this too, but I always kind of liken CCNM. I know some people say Hogwarts, but it's also a little bit like the land of misfit toys.
Yeah,
You know what I
100%.
mean? Yeah, where it's like I feel like we're all coming there because it's like we're all like, I don't know. We know that there's a calling for us, and we know that it has something to do with healing. I think a lot of us are there being confused about what healing means as well, because we all also need to heal ourselves in the process. It's an intense, rather messy 4 years, but like so much is learned along the way. But oh my goodness, yeah, it's interesting. Like the people that I've met at CCNM were the people that I feel like I could relate to the most, of people that I've met so far in my life.
Yeah, some of my closest friends still are from that school, right? Like,
Yeah,
yeah, now that I reflect back, like 3 of my really good friends all went to CCNM.
yeah, yeah,
And
exactly.
I agree, it was like Hogwarts.
Yeah.
It 100% was.
Yeah,
Like,
it definitely was. It was a
yeah.
funny experience, I will say that.
Yeah, we can leave it to funny experience.
Yeah.
Yeah. hmm hmm
So back to birth charting stuff.
hmm
For someone who is interested in learning more about their chart, what are the things that they should be paying the most attention to in the beginning?
Um, Astrology can be very overwhelming.
Hmm.
Um, so I will be honest. I think it's good that to partner with, just to have someone kind of give you, maybe do a reading, and then you can work with that and build with that.
Yeah.
But if someone's like, no, not doing that, that's fine. You don't have to. I think what's really good is to understand your basics. Like, sure, your sun sign's one aspect, it's one blip of your chart, but it's like to learn, like, what is my sun? What house is my sun located in? Right? And what are the gone right, gone wrong aspects of both my sun in that sign and my sun in that sign in that house?
Mm, okay.
Right?
Yeah.
Then I would look at your moon sign, because your moon sign is your inner world. It's actually it also represents your emotional karma.
Mm,
So, like, what emotional karma are you here to work out on how you express your emotional needs or self? But it's also like your inner world. It's what you need to feel nurtured and safe. So, I think it's important because your sun could be Leo, but then your moon can be Pisces. It's very different energy.
right.
So sometimes people are like, "Whoa, this makes more sense about why I am this way on the inside," or you might, because that's my aspect, so that's why I'm speaking on that. I can come off as very extroverted and charismatic, but I actually need a lot. Like, I like a lot of alone time,
Mm,
and I could get emotionally overwhelmed by my environment and people. But I've learned to work with that. But I was like, this makes so much sense.
yeah.
So your moon, then I would look at, where's your moon situated? Again, what are the gone right, gone wrong aspects of that moon sign and that house position? So you can see the shadow and the conscious expression of that and be like, oh, I operate a lot in the unconscious expression of that. And then I would look at what planets or aspects are communicating to both your sun and your moon.
Okay.
And then you're like, and again, you could just be like, oh, there's Pluto's hitting my moon. What is that? What is that? What does Pluto represent? Oh, intensity, shadow, transformation. Whoa, no wonder maybe I feel my emotions so intensely, or I have a lot of paranoia about expressing my emotions. So I would always say start with your basics. And then lastly is your ascendant, which is your rising sign. But you need that you would have to have a fairly accurate birth time to
Know what that
determine
is.
what your rising sign is.
Yeah.
And then, of course, your rising is like your social personalities, the mask you wear, but it also plays a key role in what your soul wants to experience in this lifetime,
Interesting. Okay.
right?
Yeah.
And then I would look at your Chiron. Chiron's always a good aspect, I think. Some people, and again, every astrologer is going to tell you something different. Some are like, oh, look at your Venus, where I'm like, I think I'm more about the healing and the life purpose aspects versus
Right.
maybe like the love aspects in your chart. Like, I can tell people that, but these are more of like my astrological niche, or where my expertise lies in. So I would say start there.
Okay.
And then you can look at your lunar nodes, your points of destiny and karma in the chart.
Right. Okay.
Those are just, that's more than enough. But I think it's really important for a lot of people just maybe understand their moon sign. Like, what do I need to feel grounded? What do I need to feel emotionally secure, stable? Or why do I act that way emotionally? Or why do I have challenges around emotionally expressing myself? And then the opposite sign of whatever sign your moon is in or your sun is in is the medicine. Okay.
Ah,
So
okay.
if your moon is in Pisces, what's the opposite? Virgo. Virgo's way more pragmatic, structure, takes action, analytical in this physical world. Pisces like, I'm just gonna go check out my own reality. I'm not dealing with this shit. So it's like sometimes it's like blend. I'm like, okay, I'm being too floofy and just like letting the universe trust. Where I'm like, I gotta actually put some. I gotta take action. I gotta create the structure.
That's interesting. Okay, so looking at the opposite of what you're, okay.
Yeah.
And that the houses thing too is also something that is very new to me in terms of my understanding of it. So I do like that element of looking into that as well. I do find, and I think a lot of people who are listening to this will probably relate to this as well, that I've always found that I don't really relate to my sun sign. And that's where learning more about birth charting and astrology in general, and like how much more there is to it was like such a godsend. Because I'm a Gemini sun, and I've never really likened myself to fit into what that would conventionally look like of like, you know, our mainstream astrological signs of what we think everything is. So it's like trying to put yourself into this weird identification of like, you know, I'm the party animal, or like this two-faced human being, or, you know, I'm super gossipy, which like, of course I have elements of that of myself. Like I definitely do. I am the party animal, and I do love some good gossip every once in a while. Right. But it's like, I don't identify it with it to the degree. And I think that has a lot to do with it, that there's so many other elements of it.
Yeah. And it depends. It's like, where's your sun position? What other planets are communicating with your sun? So like, I'm a Leo sun, but it's in the 12th house of Pisces. So now this further shapes more of like a Pisces energy, but my rising's Leo. So that's why I still come across as maybe a Leo persona, because my rising is the same as my sun.
Right.
Your rising is the social personality. That's your knee-jerk reaction of how people first perceive you.
Right.
So, but if it was something else, then I would probably more strongly associate with that. Plus, like when anyone's sun is in the 12th house, that's a whole other experience, because you just kind of feel like a complete, like you're in another world all the time. And it's really hard to kind of get congruency on your identity.
Right.
So like, that's why my rising is the same as my sun. So, you know, I understand that Leo energy, but when you remove that rising, it took me a long time to really have that, well, who am I? Because sun being in the 12th house is you really easily merge with other people. You don't have boundaries. So it's kind of like you have to really figure out, like, who am I? Like, why? Not what people identify me as. And sun in the 12th house keeps a lot of who they really are hidden. Right? So, yeah, I think it's fascinating when you start to really dissect it, because I call it like again, I get it, because a lot of things are misrepresented or understood in reality. And there's even things that maybe I have my opinions around that I don't fully understand. Do you know what I mean? And that's fair to say, but astrology is definitely something that I don't think is properly understood. And again, it depends on the astrologer, because I call it the basic bitch astrologers. You know, they just do the fluffy stuff. And again, that's fine. But I think astrology is this beautiful medicine that really helps you understand who you are to your soul core, versus checking off like these traits. Where it's like, how is everything communicating in your chart? Because that's the complexity of who you are. And I talk about, you can be fierce and kind. You can be assertive, yet, you know, humble. Like you don't have to be one or the other. And I think a lot of times people want to, again, box things into things, and someone who doesn't like being boxed into anything, astrology is so many different patterns and layers and expressions. And I think it just gives everyone a permission to be like, oh, I can be all these things.
Yeah, I completely agree with you with that. And I find too, like, especially from a mental health perspective, I don't know where, and maybe other people can relate to me on this, but for some reason, I developed a tendency or this belief that I had to maintain consistency with my emotions. Because like sometimes I'd like be like super happy in the day, and then all of a sudden nowhere I'd be like, you know, mad about something. But then this like all of a sudden happy and then mad out of nowhere type of thing like gives other people the idea of instability.
Yeah.
Right. So then it's like I feel like I developed this way of having themes around how I felt about things to avoid like this, and then people thinking that, you know, I was emotionally unstable or something like that.
Yeah, which actually propels the emotional tornado happening inside when you try to again control your emotions. And I do agree. My moon is in Pisces, so I'm just like, I could be a goddamn basket case, and I can be so sensitive. And people would say this to me, I get so defensive, and I'm like, don't call me sensitive. And I was so triggered and moody. A big word was moody. You're so moody. I could be moody. And I was like, that maybe I had a lot of shame around and resistance. And I was like, I am moody because I'm not taking the time I need to relax, to recharge, where I actually learned as a barometer. Well, if I am feeling really snippety, snappy, or moody or overwhelmed, and my emotions are up and down, and when I'm positive and someone says one thing to me, I just turn into a goddamn demon. And then like, I was just like, whoa, what is happening here? So it's like, I used it as opposed to resisted it. So it's like, clearly I need some time to myself, or I need some like self-care. Cause like, I'm clearly very overwhelmed right now with my emotions.
Yeah, I can totally relate to that.
Right?
But I found like for me, like my rising sign is in Virgo, so it's like, you know, I've got this like, you know, perfectly put together type of like persona about me, when on the inside I feel like I'm a fucking mess half the time. But it's been funny that way to like learn to understand that your emotions and your feelings are a great barometer. For you to like sense like your relationship with the outside world, or even like internally how you internally are like in relation to the outside world. So like outside in versus inside out. And learning to it's like a language of its own, of like learning to understand that.
100%. And I notice if I'm like, okay, I'm chronically angry, or I'm really always triggered by this type of, there's a pattern here, and where I get really heated right now. It's like, okay, there's something here that obviously requires me to address, whether I need to just feel the emotion. Do I not have proper boundaries here? Am I just burnt out? Do I need a getaway? Do I need to block off time for my schedule? So I think, it is really good to use that and not judge it, not to try to fix it, not to be like, oh, I should know this by now. Like, why am I being this way? Or why do I feel envy? Or why do I feel judgment? Or why am I, you know what I'm saying? I'm like, can we just realize that we're human? We'll never be immune to being human.
There's this whole idea of like enlightenment, but I feel like the percentage of people who really do reach enlightenment in this lifetime, I mean, I don't know, but to me, I feel like enlightenment for the general population, like even for me, I feel like is more a form of suppression as opposed to actually working through the stuff. It's like, no, I'm happy all the time, or that person who was rude to me, that doesn't bother me at all. It's like, no, you're just suppressing the fact that actually really bothered you. And somewhere down the road, be that like a physical manifestation, be that, you know, an emotional like outburst some way, somehow is going to happen at some point in time.
100%. There's this funny meme where it was like spirituality starter kit. It's like these crystals and oils, and it's like rainbows and all this stuff. And it's like the advanced kit. It's like a cigarette and a coffee, and like your hair is disheveled. And I don't smoke, but I drink a lot of coffee, and I'm like 100%. Like you're just like, it's like when you first enter the world, you're just like crystals and love and light, and I just have to be like loving and just know that like that's their stuff, and I just, you know, just up my vibration all the time. And it's not that I don't practice that, but I think there's this really weird because I went through it in my yoga teacher training. I saw everyone was like, oh, hi, love and light. And I was like, do you understand I have the world's best bullshit meter, and like all you people are just like living a lie right now?
Yeah.
Right. And I realized, so again, I had a lot of shame being identifying as a spiritual person, because I wasn't like kumbaya, and I was assertive, and I could swear, and I could be angry and really triggered and honest with my triggers. And I was like, what's wrong with me? Like I'm not perfect like they are. And I just realized it's a facade. That's the spiritual ego.
Yeah. It's that desire, ego. Yeah. Ego-based thinking, where it's the desire to identify with something
and be perfect at it, or the best.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So that was an interesting part early on my journey. And spirituality isn't about that. It's about, again, looking at your humanness, and obviously trying to operate from integrity and be a better person, but also giving yourself the grace and compassion that you're going to make a lot of mistakes, and it's about taking responsibility and learning, and then doing the best you can with what you know. And it's a constant, some stuff we're going to be like, again, Chiron, working with the rest of our life.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I went down the vortex of YouTube videos, like celebrity related, like top 10s of like scandals and, just things that they've experienced, and then just how harshly they were judged for these things. And it left me feeling a little like, oh my goodness, like, okay, like I need to be careful that I don't say that, because I can't offend these people, because look what happened to that celebrity because of that. And it's like, you translate it all like back to you of like, never do that, because that happened to that person.
Yep.
Yeah. And I find that it really limits one's capacity. Not that I don't think we can't not learn from others.
Yeah.
And their mistakes, if you will. But it's also, it doesn't give you permission to not live a little bit more vulnerably, or I don't know if I want to use the word recklessly, but just being a little bit more like on the edge of things, just to figure out where your edge is.
Yeah.
Opposed to playing it safe all the time.
Yeah, I think society or whatever, I don't even know what to define it as, but I do feel like, I actually was having this conversation with someone earlier today about how people are behind closed doors. They're very self-expression. And I find it fascinating that reality is based on perception, and perception's influenced by programming, which is like your experiences, your beliefs, your cultures. Like, you and I would think very differently if we were a different gender, in a different location, a different culture, a different religion. So reality is just a perception of, that's the unique perception. So I understand some people are going to get so fired up and take what I say because they see reality as a certain lens. And a lot of times people will take what people do and say out of context. Mind you, there are really unjust, unfair things that people do that they need to be held accountable. But I sometimes, I've learned to question everything, where I was like, is that person being set up? Like, what's their side of the story? Like that there's that empathy side of me. And I'm like, we all make mistakes. I'm sure if all of our personal lives were showcased, like, we ain't all saints, or we've done things that maybe we're not proud of. So I had that where I was feeling very scared to say certain things. But at the end of the day, I'm like, who are we all fooling? Yeah. There's things that a lot of people that present a certain way have done things that if it was publicly known would just be like, that celebrity.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with you. I found too, like, off the top of my head, I can't name any specific names. Like, I can't think of any celebrities specifically where this, yeah. Anyways, what I'm trying to say is I find that if somebody that is in the public eye owns the fact that they're not perfect all the time, and that they do make mistakes, they do get involved in like drama every once in a while, or like scandal, if you will, nobody thinks anything less about them. It's just like, oh yeah, well, there's so-and-so like doing that again. And there was one influencer, like a makeup influencer that I'm thinking of that I can't remember his name, but like comes to mind of thinking of that, where it's like people love him for it, in the sense where it's like they don't put anything, it's not like much stuff is actually put against him because of that, versus like people who are trying to hold up this squeaky clean image. Like Taylor Swift is an example of this, I think, where it's like it was almost to the point where she wasn't even being aligned with herself at one point in time, just because of the fact, like, she was trying to be something for everybody, you know, painting this picture that wasn't actually really her, which was so out of alignment that energetically it's like people can sense that stuff. And look what happened. You know, like she went through, I can't even imagine what that must have been like to go through, of, you know, have, you know, the social world just completely despise you for absolutely no reason.
Yeah. And even then it's like, I agree. It's because it's like when people own it, like, you know, when someone does something and they own, they're like, yeah, you know, I did that thing and it wasn't right.
Yeah.
And I, you know what, I was doing it. And then it's like, I obviously was being selfish or whatever. Even a friend, a lover, it's like, it's because you're being honest. It's when I feel like when people are like trying to justify or not own it. It's not owning it. So it's that I think it's not so much what people do, it's the authenticity around it.
Yeah.
Right. So I totally agree. But then I can also have compassion in the sense where it's like, again, we don't know what it's like, and we could all judge and say whatever. And like, it's not that I don't do that with certain things that I see. I absolutely do. But then there's the other side of me that's like, there's people that make judgments about me that are so false that if they actually probably knew versus assuming, they would think a lot differently. So again, reality again goes back to our judgments and perceptions. We sometimes don't even know what the hell reality is.
Yeah. Yeah. The whole idea of right versus wrong as well. That was something that I was thinking about this morning, of, you know, good people versus bad people, you know, and that whole idea where it's like, there is no good person or bad person. Like what defines the two?
Yeah.
You know? Yeah. I mean, of course there are extremes of like what one could define as like, that makes you a good person, this makes you a bad person.
Of course. But I think sometimes I just feel in general the past year, there's this, and I do feel like there's a silent majority that doesn't really agree with this social landscape we're in or whatever, or what's good or bad or whatever. But again, because of that extreme, maybe you feel like being reprimanded or canceled or whatever, people are just like, I don't have time for this shit. Like, I'm just gonna put my head down and just do my stuff, right? But yeah, it's interesting how I find society sometimes judges, what is good.
Yeah.
And if you're a terrible person if you don't do this thing.
Yeah. I think too that comes a lot from, because I mean, that's been something for myself lately that I've really been challenging my belief systems, or how I treat people who don't see something the way that I saw it. Or even how like, oh, someone didn't agree with me on something and now they're going to challenge me. Like, how dare they, you know, that type of like, who do they think they are? And it's like, well, Jill, the sheer fact that you said that, it's like, who do you think you are? For even, it's like turning it around and being like, look, like, you're not the most perfect person in the world. And just because someone doesn't agree with you doesn't mean that like there's like that you're right and they're wrong. It's like, because reality is a funny thing.
It is. And that's people sometimes ask me like, well, how do you just communicate certain things? Why were you worried about people disagreeing with you? I'm like, well, that's normal. That's reality. People are going to disagree. People are going to take what you say and do out of context. People are just going to project stuff onto you. And it's like, I have very firm boundaries. I want to, and protecting my energy, where I'm like, I'm sorry, I'm not your emotional online doormat. And like, I literally said this and then you projected it through that. Like, I'm not going to get in conversation about that. So I think also understanding that you don't have to, and I think there are conversations where you're like, oh, totally. Like, I see how that landed. It's not like I'm not open to learning, but whoa, like I pick and choose based on the energy of that interaction. That's for damn sure.
Yeah. And I find, so you're on TikTok a fair amount right now, right? Yeah. And I remember, you mentioning some of the things that I've noticed, some comments that you've made on Instagram about the TikTok community and some of the opinions.
I love TikTok. So I do. It's fun. It's a different energy. But at first it was very overwhelming. It's a different world than Instagram. It's a different world. And especially when you're content goes viral. Like I think it was my third TikTok went to 500,000 views, and I was like, I didn't expect it. So like, you have to understand, when you expand that level of exposure, you're going to get people who aren't your people, who aren't your niche, who aren't your genre, who hate what you talk about just in general, has nothing to do with you, that feel the need to express that in your comment section. So I remember getting hated on, but it was, I don't even know if it was like 20 to 30 comments max out of like 500,000 views, thousands of shares, thousands of likes. So this is what our brain does. And I remember I was like, I'm getting off this app. It's like, I was like, oh my God, I'm so stupid. I don't know what I'm talking about. And I was like, it's a bloody TikTok and you're generalizing. And this person, because they don't identify with being a Leo as a roommate this way, like, you're going to let user 479 prevent you from creatively expressing yourself. Like, get it together, Renata.
Mm-hmm.
So that is so normal in when you're growing and expanding. And that just is an example in my business. So I remember I was almost about to get off because I was just like, it was too much hate at once that I was like, wait a second. So I'm like, so maybe you should apply what you teach people to this new level of growth. Right. And I'm glad that I worked through that. And now I get comments. I don't engage. I leave it. I just don't give them anything. And I don't take it away because they will create a new account and then comment like, people are interesting. And I'm just like, whatever. Like, I don't have to choose to respond to this. And you have every right to express whatever you want to say. And I don't have to make it mean anything.
Yeah. Yeah, I completely agree with that. I can relate to that too with having a bit of a reservation around sharing information when it comes to skincare related stuff.
Yeah.
Because it's one of those things where if you're talking about an opinion related thing, then that's your opinion and people can disagree with you, but they can't deny the fact that in your reality, your opinion is factual.
Yeah.
Right. When it comes to conceptualizing or regurgitating, re-explaining other information that isn't necessarily like directly out of your head, that like, for like the astrology, for example, that, you are going to get people that are going to challenge like, well, Leo from my definition is actually this, what have you. When it comes to the skincare world, I find like, it's like one person, it's all research study based, right? And then they'll be like, well, where'd you get that reference from in order for you to say that, or like, which I can understand, but I find it to be, it's a form of like almost an excuse for anyone who's listening if they're feeling this way too. I have a feeling there's probably some naturopathic doctors who are going to listen to this that kind of stand like in a more reserved manner because they feel like they need to reference absolutely everything. Yeah, you know what I mean?
100%. I say this is my experience. I have 10 years of experience, or I have 5 years of experience, or I've in coaching and like whatever. And this is like, I've seen this time and time and time again. I'm sorry you don't have a research article pertaining to that. And I think as long as you are operating with integrity, and you can, as well as you're being responsible with your communication, saying, based on my experience, I noticed this, because if we're always going to look for a bloody research paper for every little thing sometimes, or like some data point, whatever, that's not realistic. But it's like, you could communicate responsibly with the information you're giving. And again, informed consent. It doesn't matter what you're doing. The person can choose to decide, and you make it known where you stand. You're not trying to bamboozle anybody.
Yeah, exactly. Like there's definitely a difference between being confident and knowing what you're talking about, and then that like, which I have like a huge dislike for the fake it till you make it culture. So like two completely different things. Right. Yeah. And then also like being humble enough to say like, if you don't know the answer to something, then I don't know, let me find out. But then also like being humble enough just to say like, this is how I feel about this situation. If you have to say like, I can't back this up by a research study specifically right now, but if anyone really wants to see that information, then I'm happy to find it and share it for you. Yeah. From that perspective too. Yeah. Anyways, it made me think of that, like that transcendence between.
And confidence is admitting you don't know. And being confident in the fact that you're just like, I don't know. Some people ask me questions. They're like, what about this in my chart? I'm like, I don't talk about that aspect, so I can't give you information. I'm not going to just pull some stuff out of my ass just to appease you or sound like I know my stuff. I know my stuff. and here are the things that I know, and here are the things that I don't know.
Yeah, I think being able to admit that you don't know something can go a long way.
It can. It really can. I'm telling you, it really can. It really can. You dig yourself a bigger grave by trying to make yourself mean all these things because you don't know. It's fine. We don't know all the information in the universe. No one does.
Yeah. No, I completely agree with you. I feel like this is a good place to end our conversation.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you have anything left, any thought, anything you'd like to share before we end this?
I think I shared this recently before, but I would maybe put out the invitation that, because everyone's always looking for a sign. So consider sometimes it's not the sign you're looking for, it's the fact that you don't trust yourself to take the action on the 100 signs that you keep getting.
Yeah.
So that's what I will leave you with.
Oh, that's a good one. Yeah, that's a goodie. And a sign doesn't have to be like a blatant, like in your face thing. It can be very subtle too. Yeah. I love that. That's a good way to end this conversation. So if you guys don't know who Renata is, she is on Instagram. And is your TikTok also aligned with Renata?
My Instagram's aligned with Renata. My TikTok is official aligned with Renata.
Official aligned with Renata. Okay, cool. You have some of the best reels ever.
Thank you.
they're like some of my favorite things. I try not to stay on social media for too long these days. But I will definitely always make sure that I check in with what you're doing.
I love it. Yeah, it can be inflammatory. And the whole point with the reels was to keep things light and funny and to kind of just like up that expression of joy. Because I think we all kind of need an injection of that right now.
100%. And you do such a good job at it too.
I appreciate it.
Yeah, no, it's amazing. So I will put some notes below this episode as well of where you can find Renata, just to make it a little bit easier for you guys. And other than that, thank you for
having me.
Your day. Yeah, no, that was a wonderful conversation.
I love it. And I hope your audience, thanks for tuning in and listening to us. Hope you got something.
Yes, definitely. Okay. Take care.